Now, I've just pulled off the highway after going through the small town of Caligden. And I would have shown you what was back in that town, except there was nothing there. There was one shop. Now, the town of Caligden and the town a little further back called Nangelok, there's an interesting story about those two towns. So when I pull up over here a little bit, I'll tell you about it. Now, as the story goes, one of the two towns was settled first, but no one knows really which one it was. Now, one of the residents in the first town had an argument with one of the other residents, and he stormed off and started up his own community just upriver a little bit, or down. Now, just to spite the other end of the argument, he started up his own town and named it the same as the first town, only the name was back to front. So, for example, Nangiloc, which is spelled N-A-N-G-I-L-O-C, when you spell it backwards, it reads out Caligden, which is the other town just down the river a little bit. And when you read out Caligden, it spells Nangiloc, which is N-A-N-G-I-L-O-C, but backwards. So no one really knows which town was first, or whether that story is true or not, but all the same, it's pretty interesting. Right, well, we're finished here, so we'll head off to Swann Hill before it gets dark. In the morning, I'll show you a little around there. Now, I've just turned off the Murray Valley Highway. I'm on a bit of a dirt track now, which goes for about 6 or 7 kilometres, so the signpost says back there. When we get to the end here, we should be able to see the junction where the Murrumbidgee River comes out and joins into the Murray. So this is the Murrumbidgee River behind me, and as you can see, she's a little bit smaller than the Murray. However, looks can be deceiving. If you see, the Murrumbidgee starts flowing some 900 kilometres inland, way up in the Snowy Mountains, which is part of the Australian Alps. She flows all the way down here, then all the way down to Gula where we started, which is over 1200 kilometres away. Alright, so how's this for a spot then? Now, this whole area is called Goodnight, and it got its name because of one particular drover that used to live just up in the riverbanks here a little bit. Now, he couldn't speak any English except for one word, which was goodnight. So when the paddle steamers would come past, when there was a lot more water obviously, and people would come down and use the river, and the drovers would come and water their cattle or sheep, they would get greeted by this particular drover with the word goodnight. And whether it was morning, night, lunchtime, it made no difference whatsoever. The same greeting would always be the same, the only word that this man knew. Which is how this place got its name of Goodnight. Now, just around the corner is a place called the Bitch and Pup, so we'll head around there and I'll show you just upstream a little bit. You should be able to see behind me here, if you have a closer look, the rock's starting to stick out of the water. And this is the start of the Bitch and Pups. Now, this whole section of the river, for kilometres and kilometres and kilometres upstream, starts to get very shallow and very rocky on the bottom. Now, those rocks behind me, if you had another week or two with no rain, which is more than likely what's going to happen, they'd probably be a foot or two out of the water. So you can see it's a perfect example on why I couldn't take the boat any further up from Mildura and I had to take it back out downstream. Very dangerous. They're about halfway along the Murray now and about halfway between the ocean and the mountains, and we're just pulling into the very popular and thriving town of Swann Hill, which is located at about the 1400 river kilometre mark on the map. Now Swann Hill was named by Major Mitchell on the 20th of June in 1838 on his trip along the Murray, and it was when he camped on a sand hill for the night just nearby here somewhere that he was kept awake all through the night by the black swans on a rise just west of his campsite. And it was that rise that he named Swann Hill, which is the area that the town is located in today.
Now the first thing that you must visit when you arrive in the town of Swann Hill is the famous Burke and Wills tree, which is located near the centre of town. For this tree now stands at over 27 metres in height and has a branch span of around 44 metres. You see, this tree, which is a mountain-bag fig, was planted by Burke and Wills in the front garden of the local doctor's house, before they set off on the second leg of their ill-fated expedition across Australia. A trip which ended the lives of both Burke and Wills and 5 other men. It was a trip that started them in Melbourne and was to end up in the Gulf of Carpentaria, right up the top of Australia. It was a trip that started out with 16 men and 2 years' supply of food, 80 pairs of shoes, beds, hats and buckets, and was to be the first expedition to cross the continent of Australia on foot, which was something that had never been done before by the white man. But it was a trip that ended in peril. You see, further north, once the group had passed the Darling River, the expedition set up base camp at Cooper's Creek, and it was there that they were to wait for more supplies. However, Burke became impatient, and himself, Wills and 2 other men set off deciding to worry about the supplies when they returned back to camp. But incredible conditions and intense heat day after day took a toll on the 4 men, and on their return from the Gulf of Carpentaria, in which they reached in February 1861, they arrived 1 man short, having lost one of their companions, a Mr. Gray, along the way. However, when they again reached their base camp at Cooper's Creek, they had found that the rest of their party had already left, just 1 day before them themselves had arrived. But the party had buried supplies for the men under a tree at the camp, and they had marked the spot by carving the word dig into the tree, thinking the men would easily find the supplies, but sadly they did not. Having Gray die on the return journey from the Gulf, Burke, Wills and King survived for another 2 months at the site of Cooper's Creek, having never found the food and the water left to them by their party. Firstly, it was Will that died, and then Burke, and it was during Burke's final hours, when he became too weak to stand, that he then asked King to leave him and place his pistol in his hand, and he then left this note scrawled on a piece of paper. King has behaved nobly, and I hope if he lives he is properly rewarded. King has stayed with me until the last. He has left me at my own request, unburied and with my pistol in hand. King eventually wandered off delirious and extremely malnourished, to be taken in by a tribe of Aboriginals, and then to be found on the 15th of September 1861 by a search party and taken back to Melbourne.
Don't forget to give the video a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button, that way you'll get notified to all my new videos when I upload them. And if you want to contact me, you can do so through my website, the link's in the description below. See you next time.